In my hands, I have the book The Whale Child, an amazing Indigenous written and illustrated book about a whale child that becomes a human child to come to land and alert the people about the challenges our oceans are facing. On land, he meets a young Coast Salish girl named Alex, who learns from Shiny, the whale child, that the living spirit of water exists in everything, from glaciers, rivers, oceans, rain, plant, and all living creatures. Together, the two travel the earth, confronting the realities of a planet that is threatened by an uncertain future. Inspired by Shiny's hope, humor, and wisdom, Alex makes a promise to become a teacher for future generations. She realizes that the timeless Indigenous value of environment stewardship is needed now more than ever, and that we all must stand up on behalf of Mother Earth. This is an incredible story, written and illustrated by Indigenous author Keith Egawa and Chenoa Egawa, that tells a story of the existing environment issues with a message of hope, education, sharing, and action. I can't wait for you to listen to my conversation with Keith and Chenoa. In matter of fact, I love this book so much that I wanted to send a couple copies of The Whale Child to listeners of this podcast. All you have to do is go to our new website, indigenousearth.org, and leave us a voicemail. On the short message, give us your name, what part of the world you're listening from, and what has been the most interesting thing you have learned from our podcast. I then would choose some random listeners to get a copy of The Whale Child, and the voicemail will be heard on future episodes. So go to Indigenous Earth and leave us a message. And without further ado, here is Keith and Chenoa, writers of The Whale Child.
My name is Chenoa Egawa, and I come from the Lummi and S'Klallam peoples in the Pacific Northwest, the state of Washington, and am an author and an artist, singer, ceremonial person. I take care of some of our ceremonial ways, some of the wisdom and teachings, and that's mainly it.
And I'm Keith Egawa. I'm Chenoa's brother, and I'm also a writer and an artist. I was predominantly an artist as a younger person, and then I kind of came back to it as Chenoa and I started working on these visual children's books for young people together. I've also done a lot of work in the field of social services, specifically for urban Native American families and children, like in the greater Seattle area, for example, as well as some of the reservations close by.
That is amazing, and I'm so happy to have you both, like I said, and have us siblings, that came together for a project. Me and my brothers, we always do projects together, and it's so great when we are able to work together to, put something forward into the community. So it's awesome what you're doing. And you say the Pacific, and I was just wondering, what does it look like? Because, I live in Orlando, and here we have the swamps, the Everglades, the rivers. And I recently went to Arizona, and I was like, wow, this is a desert. I was like so shocked. I was like, wow, there is a world outside the little swamp here in Orlando. So I just wondering, like, what does it look like where you guys are?
So we have Eastern Washington and Western Washington. And Eastern is actually, it's very dry, hot, almost, nearly desert-like temperatures. The environment is more plateau, some plains, and then you also get some pine forests. And so Washington it's more or less divided by the Cascade Mountain Range right down the middle. And so Western Washington, heavy rainfall, and it's very green. And so the Washington coast is, that's on the Pacific Ocean. But then you have the Straits of Juan de Fuca, which is a huge waterway which leads into the Puget Sound. So the Puget Sound takes up a large portion of the northwestern part of Washington where we live. So with the rainfall, it's historically been, predominantly rainforest, just huge tracts of dense rainforest, which, due to logging, you get a lot of patchwork now where if you drive from Seattle to say, across the Olympic Peninsula to the ocean, you're going to see these huge, tracts of clear cuts. But there's a lot of biodiversity in terms of flora and fauna, and just really a rich resource area.
That sounds like a beautiful place to visit.
It's beautiful. And especially right now, because we've had a lot of rain this year, you can tell that the climate's been changing for many years already. And sometimes we get a drought in the summer. And last year, actually around this time, we had temperatures that went over 100 degrees for several days in a row. And I was out walking on the beach, and the shellfish were just cooked alive in their shells. It was so hot. But this year it has been raining almost every day and hard. And when the sun comes out, like right now, it's just green, 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 green. And it's absolutely beautiful right now. Really pretty.
That's awesome. I do want to visit that part of the country. It looks so beautiful. And I think you capture so well on your book. And, I'm excited to talk about it. So, you have The Whale Child is a book that both of you created that tells a story. I think you'll be able to tell a little bit more about what the book is about. So I don't know if you want to share that with us.
So it's the story of Shiny, and he is a young whale. And after his birth, his mother takes him, throughout the oceans of the world on their traditional migratory pathways. And she just basically shows him their world. But during the journey, she also begins to show him negative things that are happening to the planet due to humans, things like, species extinction, rising ocean temperature, et cetera. And so the spirit of the ocean decides chooses Shiny to become a human boy for a brief visit on land, so that he may teach a human girl about these things that he's become aware of, so that she can in turn become a teacher for other young people and start making human beings more aware that we're in a very critical place right now environmentally, and that, one, people need to be aware of it, and two, they need to start making changes and taking action. So in his short visit on land, Shiny imparts this understanding to this human girl, Alex.
And we integrate the teachings. So the spirit of the ocean, the spirit of the water. In our Indigenous teachings, we know that the elements are alive and water is alive. Many people nowadays have heard water is life, just from some of the different protests to pipelines going through territories and contaminating waters. But water, the spirit of the water, sees that this young child that's a whale has the perfect ability to be this translator, to say, hey, this is the world that I come from. But we were intending, this is like a spirit that has been on the earth before. And so as all of us, we have very wonderful gifts. Each person, each creature, each plant comes into the world with something specific that it's meant to do. And so this, the water spirit recognizes the whale child will be the perfect one to be transformed into a human, and acknowledges that this, even though he's from the ocean, that he's related to the beings on the land, because we're all related, we're all interconnected. And so when he meets the human girl, she's also a Coast Salish girl. And so her teachings from her people are part of the wisdom that she understands. But seeing it also, in addition, from the whale's perspective, as he swims through the ocean and on the migratory paths and sees firsthand underwater something that we can't do as humans, then he tells her, this is what I see. This is what's happening in my world. And we're family, we need to help each other.
Yeah, it's a beautiful story that really touched my heart, because it goes in so many different layers about, the teachings of taking care of the planet, but also, like you say, our place in the whole cosmos. I think that's really cool image that of the kid, coming out of the water. It was so beautiful to portray. And I really like that about the book. I got the paper copy, is that the drawings really complement the story, And, my niece, she's a little bit younger, but she was able to kind of look at the pictures, and I was kind of able to explain to her. And you mentioned earlier you were walking on the beach and you saw that the fish was being cooked because of climate change. Is that kind of like what draw you to write the book? Is things that you're seeing around you?
Yes, that was one. We were initially inspired to write the book by an actual event that happened through a dream my sister had about the whales and the whale people. And so initially we knew that this was a dream that was connected to one of our family members, and seeing that it's possible to have received these messages from other places, from other creatures, other beings that inhabit the planet. And so we were inspired at first to just say, okay, our children need to remember who they are and where they come from, because we all come into this world in a very sacred way. It's when you think about the birth, it's a very sacred thing. And the children are born wide open. They're born curious and loving, and everything is exciting and interesting. And they're not born with judgment and criticism. And then as they grow, sometimes there's all the influences of society that infiltrate the mind and the way of life. And so sometimes they end up going through a hard time when they get older, because they kind of forget that sacred origin of how they were born. And so we thought, we want our children to remember. We want the children in our family to remember, and the children of the world to remember that they're special, they're sacred, they're important, each and every one of them. And then as our children in our family started growing up, we were just wondering, I'll let Keith talk to this part, about how we were concerned for our children and what the world will look like. So Keith can answer this part.
Yeah. So, right. In addition to what Chenoa mentioned about that initial inspiration is so we talked about that dream, and we, talked about the things that she just addressed. And we thought, we need to figure out a way, because it's so evident that we're in an absolute crisis environmentally, and that things have to change. And even if we do make positive changes, we're going to face some really serious challenges. So we were thinking, how can we contribute to that awareness and that change in people? And of course, our minds naturally went to the young people and the open-mindedness of children, not to mention the fact that they're the ones who are going to be left with this. They're the ones who are truly going to be living in, whatever is to come. So it was challenging in the sense that it's a really, it's a dark topic. It's a heavy, frightening topic. And so when we have conversations like this, I imagine people think, well, how are you communicating this to kids without being overbearing, without frightening them and overwhelming them? And so that's why we decided to deliver it in the way that the whale child tells the story. It kind of gently opens the door to the issue. It shows kids, these things are wrong with the world because of human behavior. Here's some examples of bad things that are happening in the world. And then here are some ways that you can start making positive changes, even as a child, and then learn more and continue to do more as you get older. So the current state of the world was more than an inspiration. We felt compelled to do something, and this was the direction that we took.
The responsibility, right? I mean, I think if we each take responsibility, and whatever gift it is that each of us have, and like what you're doing here, Frank, with the podcast and opening up the dialogue and talking with people and sharing it, it's important that each one of us figure out a way of how we can contribute to the whole. And so it's a responsibility as a person who's alive here on this earth, and receiving from the earth, receiving the plants and receiving the water and receiving the breath of life, the sun. We're made of these things. We're made of the earth. We're made of the sky. When we forget those things, then we get disconnected. And then there's a lot of destruction that happens both inside of people and outside of people, because it's a direct reflection outside is a reflection of inside, and inside is a reflection of outside. And so it's a responsibility. It's like, how are you going to use your voice? Everyone's voice is a gift too. And so we all have a responsibility to, I think, especially in this day and age, to figure out a way where our work in some capacity can bring healing to the planet, either through the nature or through the people. And that should be a part of everyone's job now, that there's changes that are coming. And this would be something that would make a big impact if everyone just slightly altered their work to benefit, because we take from the earth and we aren't giving back. And we know from our teachings as Indigenous peoples that there's reciprocity, that you can't just take and take and take. There's always an action of giving and receiving and giving and receiving. And that's what makes everything continue to circulate. If it's just one way, then it just kind of breaks everything. So it needs to be circular, like the shape of the earth and the shape of the sun, the shape of the moon. Everything in nature is circular if you start looking at it, So yeah, the responsibility to contribute in some way to the healing and the awakening of our hearts, because the remembering is important, and we all have this inside of us. And some of us just don't hear it as we grow up because it has not been a part of the school system. It's not a part of the educational system. It's not a part of dominant culture and the desire to sell us things and stuff. And so it's kind of, in that way, sort of a deliberate action to keep us from recognizing the real relationship that we have to everything. We're not just this individual person walking around. We're completely interconnected with everything and everybody. And so how are we going to be? We have to change ourselves in order to change the world.
Right. And no matter how technologically advanced we are, no matter how clever human beings and our science is, we need air to live. We need palatable, clean, drinkable water to live. We need the species variation that the planet has in order to live. We need, functioning soil that's not depleted and toxic in order to live. So yeah, these connections to the earth, I think, people's lives become so insulated with technology and easy access to our basic needs that people don't really realize that we are, no matter how advanced we are fundamentally dependent on a healthy environment.
And no matter how advanced we think we're going in a very wrong direction, and perhaps we're not that advanced at all. That it's actually the ancient teachings that were more advanced. And so there was a mistake in the perspective of what was looked at as civilized and advanced, as opposed to the wisdom of living in a harmonious, balanced way where you respect and honor everything in life, recognizing your direct relationship to it. And so I don't know if we're that highly advanced or not, right, but we certainly could use the technologies that we've created in better ways to deliver these messages and to have these conversations and to come together and help each other. Because I do believe that as human beings of this planet all together, there's a lot of wisdom. There's a lot of teachings that need to come to the surface and guide the way into the future from here, because we're seeing the destruction of this other system. It's kind of crumbling down now. And so what's going to rise up out of that? And I think that it has to be coming back to, we are nature. We are nature. How are we going to demonstrate this and live in a good way with the earth that is so precious, so incredibly precious? And those changes need to be guided by the wisdom, the cultures that contain the wisdom, and the people that contain the wisdom of how to do that. And it will be beautiful. So we tell our children that don't get sad, don't get worried. The changes that are coming can be beautiful, because if we can restore this earth and restore our waterways and the soils and the lands, and then it will be beautiful, because it's going to be a whole new way of life maybe not all about the stress of your job and your finances and your fame and your status. And it's going to be about community and family and remembering how to gather from the land and how to give back to the land. And, it's going to be something beautiful if we can really do it.
Yeah, it's so many good points that both of you mentioned. And one thing that kind of really jumps to me, what you said, is that the book is so hopeful with the message of, taking care of the earth and seeing the problems, but not getting people with despair. Because, for example, I do a lot of cleanups. We go to different rivers and lakes, and people keep sending me images of animals getting hurt. And I always say, don't send me those things. I don't want to see it. Send me the solutions. Send me pictures of people doing cleanups. Those are the things I want to see. And this book is so nice because it's really gentle. It's almost like a grandmother that is talking to you and instructing you. And I love the spirit of the book so much. And I meant to ask you, there is a character, the Bufflehead. He was my favorite character on the book, more than the whale child and the girl. And I just want to know more about him. What is his backstory?
Yeah, and Chenoa, you can add to this too.
Okay.
But I love the Bufflehead character. So just on a real simple level, that's an animal that I really love. The Bufflehead ducks, they're just amazing. These tiny little guys. But so with the whale child, with Shiny, so he's really obviously, a voice from nature. He magically became a human from a whale. We know that he's a whale, through this magic of nature, through this power. But so with Bufflehead, he's much more subtle. So Alex, not only can she not hear him speak initially, she doubts that he really can't. She doesn't even think it's real. So when you think about, stories from all over the world, animals communicating with people is an ever present thing in a lot of people's stories. So over time, as Alex starts to realize that Bufflehead really is communicating, so he symbolizes that, like Shiny, the voices from nature, the messages from nature, but the ones that you have to really pay attention in order to hear. You have to be open to it. You have to be seeking it out and so that's why in the end, Alex has made this journey to now she understands, she's aware, she knows what she needs to do, and now she can also hear the voice of Bufflehead.
And I'll add to that because I always think that in the communication, we think of communication as speaking words, right? But when I think our people and all people that lived with nature in a harmonious way before colonization and modernization and industrialization happened, we were more in our body and more in our senses, and we would smell the plants and the flowers, and we would hear the sounds, and there wasn't so much distraction. We weren't so busy and we weren't so stressed, so there was naturally a more presence about our way of life. And the people who are spiritually in tune can hear. We all have that ability. I don't want to say some people have it and some don't. I think some have it opened and some are waiting to open it, because we all have the ability. But when you stop listening and you stop seeing what's really there, like taking things for granted and overlooking them because your mind is running away over here, and so you're not really present and you don't really see and feel, and then you miss those communications. One example I can give you is I just remember the first time when I was making a prayer to the water, and then as I was outside, and then it started raining, and now it happens a lot. And so the nature will acknowledge you and say, give you some sign that says, I'm hearing you. I see you, here, I'm going to fall this rain upon you, and you're going to know that I'm talking to you, communicating. And so I feel like in our ancient stories, the animals did talk. They say they did speak the language of the people. And then there were different things that happened in that creation story where the animals decided to be the ones that would help the humans. And so the humans became like the dominant species, but there were these rules that had to be acknowledged for the animals to continue to come and to feed the people and to help the people, and the plants to come and help the people. We had to honor them and respect them in a certain way, only take what we needed, not take too much. And so it's that relationship again, and the ability to just be quiet. Like in the book, we talk about that too. Let your mind be still and listen and feel and close your eyes if you need to. And, so it's like bring yourself into that deeper awareness. And so that's kind of what the Bufflehead's talking about too. With her, she's able to communicate with him as she becomes more in tune to what's going on. So her level of awareness now is greater than when she began. And now she's hearing how to communicate with the natural world.
Yeah. So as that connection between her and Bufflehead grows stronger, that symbolizes, right, that she is becoming more in tune with everything around her, with her environment, with the world.
Yeah, it was beautiful. All his parts, for some reason, really spoke to me, his character. And in my mind, I was like, man, this would be an amazing animated series. So you probably thought about this. I don't know if Netflix, you're hearing, you make this a show. This is such a good story that is so visual when you're reading. Like I could really see like the images and the traveling in my mind. And I mean, the beautiful pictures that come with it is amazing too. Can you tell me more about those drawings that comes with the book?
We both worked on the drawings together, and we started out with basic idea. And then we kind of, as the story progressed, we would get back together and we would meet with each other, and we would say, oh, for this part, I can see this, I can see something like that. And then we would each take on different drawings. And then it was kind of just coming together that way. It wasn't like we had the whole thing decided on how the beginning and the end would be and the middle. So the pictures came with our own imagination and our own visualization as the story opened.
Yeah, and it's funny because like Chenoa was saying, we would draw and paint on our own, and then we would get together and look at what we had done. And you know how with visual things, with like movies and TV, how they do storyboarding, well, they'll illustrate every scene throughout. Well, we would just be at home, just paint, we'd read the book, we'd think something would occur to us, a visual from one of the scenes, and we would just start painting it. And then we would get together and we would have just all of this stuff without consulting with each other. I mean, we did consult, but we did a lot of painting just off the cuff because we were just inspired to do it. So we actually ended up with a lot of pictures that aren't in the book. There's probably at least as many that aren't in the book, right, Chenoa, that as there are in the book. But yeah, so that process was really fun, because then when we would see what we'd each done, then we would actually talk it out and be like, okay, wouldn't it be great if there was an image of such and such? And then, one of us would choose to go home and give that picture a shot. And yeah, it was a really fun process.
And on the note about a visual animation, we totally saw that too. We were thinking, oh my gosh, maybe this will be a movie or an animated story. And even before we got published, I was saying, well, if we don't, let's do this full soundscape audiobook with the images, and we could kind of make it like an old-fashioned movie, with putting all the drawings together. And then we ended up getting published, and we just finished the audiobook 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, something like that. And I hope it does happen, because it would be a really good series and a way to continue to address the issues that are at hand, an educational series for kids that would be engaging and inspiring and help them to see what solutions there are and how to have the humor in there too. And it would be great.
Yeah, and the audiobook is pretty good too. It's just phenomenal to be able to listen to the spoken word and, having that book come to life in that style. So I'm happy that you also have the audiobook available for people to be able to listen to. And one thing that kind of really jumps at me when I was reading the book is that I felt like there was so many traditional knowledge that was kind of inserted into the book, and here and there you'd be like, this kind of sounds like a traditional knowledge. And can you tell me more about your experience about bringing those maybe oral traditions into the book?
Yeah, so we did bring a lot of teachings in, and just looking at how can we help explain through our traditional knowledge, through the stories, the oral tradition, usually for the people to see that this is how the world is from another perspective. And so we would always try and add in all of those teachings. And one in particular that I'm thinking of is with the salmon scene in one of the later chapters. And they're talking about the teachings, but the little girl's talking to the whale child too about what her grandparents told her about the size the salmon used to be, and how to fish in a way that you're in balance with that species, the salmon people. That you don't take too much, that you help the people who can't help themselves. And so you provide for the people in your community who need help, and you respect and honor those fish and recognize the gift of something else giving its life to sustain you, that there's a responsibility and a sacred connection there that needs to be upheld. So it was an intentional thing to bring that part into the book too.
And that was one of my favorite parts of the book, is just reading all those traditional knowledge passed down in a way that really inspire you to take care of the planet. And both of you, I know that you've been on the environment movement for a long time, working to protect our planet. Can you tell us about your experience, the different projects you have done in the past?
One of the things I did, I speak Spanish, and I worked with a lot of the indigenous peoples from the North, Central, and South America, especially, but also at the United Nations and the Earth Summit in Rio back in '92, and looking at ways of coming together with other indigenous peoples and sharing what was going on in our communities. One time we went to Chile and stood in support of the Mapuche and Pehuenche, trying to stop one of the large-scale dam projects in their traditional territories. And you also see the history of what has happened with this process of colonization throughout the world. And what I could see is that here in the United States, it happened a little earlier than in Central and South America in some places. And then the effect was the same as we went through so it's almost like a repetition of history keeps happening. It's in Australia too, in New Zealand, in different countries in Asia, in India. I mean, it's been pretty much everywhere in the world because there were indigenous peoples everywhere, right? And so I feel like the work that we've done here recently is more in the Salish Sea, which is the name for our waterways that are called the Puget Sound in the English language, but it's known as the Salish Sea to all the Coast Salish people, and protecting this sea and looking at the orcas that are having a really hard time surviving, one of the pods that are local residents to the region, and how the dams along the Columbia River between Washington, Oregon, and Idaho those dams have prevented the Chinook salmon from surviving. And that's the main food source for the orcas. So there's just kind of what we addressed again in the book about one species suffering, and then all the species that are connected to that species through the food chain, and they all have it being impacted. So, but also you look at the Salish Sea, and the Salish Sea is not just a swimming pool. It doesn't have borders. It doesn't have barriers. Nature does not have borders and barriers. Only humans have borders, barriers, and walls. So in our humanness, we like to create, this is the border between Canada and the United States, but actually we have indigenous peoples who lived on both sides of that. There was no border. That was an artificial creation. And so the water that has traveled in the Salish Sea has been all around the world. How many thousands of times in the glaciers, in the rain, in the rivers, in the water tables beneath the ground, and water keeps circulating, air keeps circulating, everything is moving. And so in that way too, we can see that everything is connected, and we have to bring ourselves back into that connection and open our minds and open our hearts and take the borders and barriers and blockages out so that we can see and see that together we have this life. The water doesn't just give itself to some people or to some animals and some plants and then say, oh, I don't want to give it to you guys because I don't like you guys. And so there's a generosity and there's an inclusiveness of the earth. And I think that that's also a quality that many people do have, but I think it's needed more in the world to, and that's part of our tradition as well, is that the guests that come into your life, into your home, you take care of them and you make them feel welcome, and you want them to come back, and you want to have a good relationship, and you want them to be fed, and you want them to have water, and so I think it's important to look at the man-made barriers from languages and cultures and countries, and that is all artificial. That is all for some other reason to benefit a few people and kind of leave everyone else out. And we need to take care of our resources that we have. I don't even like to call them resources. That's like an American word that's inaccurate. It's not just a resource. It's a living thing with a purpose that is part of the whole. In order for it to be good for all of us, that thing has to be there too. Everything has its place. Everything has its part.
I'm learning so much just from the brief time that I'm talking to all of you. And I was just thinking, what would you say would be a good word of advice that people listening to this podcast can do from home to protect our planet? So, we have people all over the world to listen to this podcast. What would you say is one thing they can do to leave this world a better place?
Well, one step in the process that I would highly recommend, that's just so crucial, is that step of information, of figuring out, am I aware of the state of the planet? Am I aware of the problems that we're actually already facing that are getting worse? So I would recommend that education, that seeking out, specific information about, things that are happening locally, things that are happening in the next state over, in the next country over, in the ocean, and just expanding that understanding of what is actually happening. And then that begins to motivate you to figure out things that you can do. And Chenoa, you can talk more about this too, but one of the first steps is just day-to-day thinking about consumption, thinking about how much we consume and the waste that's connected to it. When you think of how everything is individually plastic wrapped, we throw everything away after one, in some countries are better and worse than others, but in general, we throw so much away. We don't reuse things. We create, extra packaging when it's unnecessary. And to go to the story, the water bottle example is a really good one, where you just see those empty water bottles everywhere. And also when I speak of, seeking out information, we know that there are literally islands of plastic in the ocean the size of states. I mean, it's surreal. The extent is so huge. So that would be a first step. But and like we try to convey in the story, it really is, there isn't any, one or two or three things you can do. The the change has to be really significant, but it is good to start with small things and become more and more aware, and then do more as you can do more. But I would say start with information, with learning more.
Right. And I think I had this one example because when I was in Guatemala, I went to this village. I went to many different villages, Mayan villages, and in one there was just plastic everywhere, and we were talking about it, like what's going on with all this? It's all over. It's just all over the ground. Well, it was really recent at that time when I was there that plastic was introduced at the markets. So everybody would go to the market. So many people still do go to the market for their food, but you would have just a basket that you would put all your food in, and you would buy it fresh regularly, and you would buy it locally and seasonally from the people around you. And there was no plastic at all. And then somebody brought in plastic and thought that was a good idea. Well, before plastic, everything was biodegradable. And so people would throw their the skins of the peels of the food or whatever on the ground into the earth, and it would biodegrade. And there was no distinction about the plastic because there was no awareness of what this substance is and that it never biodegrades. And so it was just natural to put it onto the ground because that's where everything else could go and become soil again. And I think in our country, in the first world countries where we produce so much of the packaging, like sometimes I go into the store now and the green beans are wrapped in this thick plastic bag. And I'm like with handles, and I'm like, why are you guys doing this? You know what? And so I think looking at how can we get our own hands in the soil? How can we start nurturing a seed and see what it feels like to grow our own food? And so it's going to be about community too. It's going to be about becoming community again and having community gardens and helping each other to see that we don't need all these things. Make things with your hands. You don't need to have, so much of stuff that you just need to keep buying and buying more. And I think the water, where does your water come from? We say to the kids, where does your water come from? They say it comes out of the faucet, and no, where does it come from? Where is this water coming to you from? Is it from the mountains? Is it from the groundwater? If you get to know your water system, get to know your own watershed, and then study what's happening along the way. What is being added into the water on its journey to your home, if you're lucky enough to have water at your home, because there's still people in this country who haul their water. I'm thinking on some reservations in the United States, some people still go to the water well and haul their water. They do not have running water to this day in this country. And in many parts of the world, it's that way, but there's more respect that way too. Like, just having things given to us. And the fire, that's the other thing, the connection to the fire, that's the one of the most elder of the grandfather fire, that carries the wisdom of the existence of all life on earth. And now we just have electricity and we turn up our heater and we have no relationship to the element of the fire, the spirit of the fire. And so we just crank our heat up or crank our air conditioning, and we don't think about where this energy is coming from. And then seasonally, how do we live more seasonally? Is this food coming from way over there on the other side of the planet to come here? What is growing in our area? Kind of like being more local. I mean, it's just kind of endless. I'm sorry, there's not really one thing.
Yeah, no, it is. That's the thing. It is. That's kind of what I was trying to get at, is it really is endless. And that's why what's important is the starting point for a person to say, this is important. I need to know more about it. And then I can figure out things that I can do. But also to go back to your question about, just simple advice. And this relates to what Chenoa was getting at, is also the use of water and how people don't really think about the value of it and now the scarcity of it. it and the droughts we're facing. When you think of someone like, if you watch a person washing dishes and the faucet is just running the whole time, and it is literally just gallons of water going straight from the faucet into the sewer, and think of how precious it really is. And here's the one that really epitomizes it for me. It's just one example, but it really is the epitome of just somehow being disconnected from how valuable water is. Around here, you see a lot of, maintaining lawns, just thousands of gallons of water to have a golf course looking patch of grass in front of your house or around your house. And it really just blows my mind. And I don't understand it, but it's just that not thinking, that not being aware. And that's so when you ask about things, to tell people initially, it's just to notice things like that and then realize the repercussions of it. Thousands of gallons of water so you have a green lawn.
And look it up, because we were talking about that when we were writing the book too, because we were thinking, what all do we want to put in there? And so I looked up when green lawns started happening and all the fertilizers that are thrown onto the grass in order to make it that way. And it was part of the golfing industry. So that was like a new great thing when golfing came, to have a lawn that looks like a golf course. So you're throwing the chemicals. Also thinking about the soaps that we use, like some of those really smelly laundry detergents, and everything is going back into the water system. And so the more chemicals, and even the drugs that people are taking, the pharmaceuticals that people are taking, are being found in the water that we drink now. So everything is connected. And so if you follow one thing, it will lead you to everything, because everything is connected. So you start somewhere. That's why we say take one smart step in the right direction and the next will come much easier. So if you follow the water, and then the water will show you everything that's going on in all the places. So you just have to start somewhere. And there's a lot of work to be done, but a lot of good work to be done.
Yeah, I'm so glad that y'all mentioned water, because to me, water is so important. I know that I'm happy when I'm around water. I know that when I drink water, I just feel refreshed. And I did a short film about water conservation that won a prize. And it was kind of really 30 seconds talking about, just closing the tap when you're brushing your teeth. But I remember just seeing the comments that people leaving on YouTube. But they were saying like, no, what's the point of like conserving water? Because it's just going to go out to the ground and it's going to go to the cloud and back to the water. Kind of like a drawing that we do in school of like the water cycle. But the problem is that the water cycle is broken. It doesn't work like that, because we contaminate the water, like you mentioned, and that water does not go up to become fresh water again. And also our number one crop that we water, it's lawn. It's something that we not even eat. And those lawns are biological dead zones that butterflies don't go to, and hummingbirds and bees. And if you look at my house, it's not that good looking, but I see a whole bunch of wildlife on it, and that makes me happy.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, lawns aren't ecosystems. It's one strain of grass imported from somewhere else. It's completely an artificial life form. Yeah, there's no significant life within a lawn at all. And like Chenoa mentioned, there are lakes that are completely dead from the is it nitrogen? Or nitrogen, possibly other, chemicals that are in the fertilizers, causing this unbelievable like algae blooms or things related to that choke off all the oxygen to the lake. And so these amazing thriving ecosystems are literally dead lakes. And some of that is tied directly just to lawn care.
And so there's a couple of things. I don't know how long we have, or we don't have to use all of this, but I used to work with the International Rivers Network when I went down to South America, and they were talking about the POPs and the PCBs. So it's all the pollutants and contaminants that circulate around the northern and southern poles. And so even they were wondering, why do the caribou in the Arctic Circle have cancer? And it's because the highest concentration of the chemicals from all of our way of life, they circulate around the earth and then they go to the poles and then they fall in the poles. And so even out there in the most remote area, you would think that they would still be healthy, but they're not. Their caribou have cancer. And we have that down here too with our deer and our elk. And then the other thing that Keith was saying the other day to me was there's no insects around. Like, where did all the bugs go? And, when's the last time you cleaned bugs off your windshield? Not that that's good. We're out killing them with our windshields, but no bees hardly at all this year. No bees, not even mosquitoes, not that you would wish for those, but they're part of it too. And then there's no other pollinator. I haven't seen them this year. And so I know that these things that some of them we can see and some of them we can't see, but everything's affecting the whole. And so I look at, one of those solutions too, like what's to learn about the permaculture and the way of planting that invites the pollinators and that cares for multiple species in one small patch of area that you can invite them in and give them some life too, and that's a scary thing. I don't know where and the birds, there used to be so many millions and millions and millions of birds. And so children don't grow up knowing that. And so we have to remember the history. I think this is also important. We have to know our history in order to know where we're at and where we're going to go, because history keeps repeating itself over and over and over again. And, if we're going to say we're evolved humans, we should be over going to war by now. Where is our intelligence about sitting down and talking with one another and controlling our emotions and seeing our commonality and being able to find solutions together? A lot of the leadership, this is another subject, but it's like spoiled children that never had to listen to anybody. It's like, we need to teach our children, this is how you communicate. This is how you can listen to each other. This is how you can express your own heart. This is how you do this. This is how you come to agree with one another and understand each other and listen to the diversity of perspectives that we carry from all cultures. That is the richness of being alive. It's our diversity in nature and our diversity as people that is the wealth. When we try to make everybody the same, that's when it's one of our teachings. They say, don't teach everyone the same thing, because then we won't need each other. Everybody needs to have their thing that they bring to the table. And then it's just like a rich ecosystem of wisdom and knowledge and teachings. And we still have that. We need to bring it together and we need to share it across cultures. That's what time we're in, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And congratulations again on your book. Phenomenal job. I'm so excited to have talked to both of you. This book is going to be a big part of my life from now on. And I hope that other people are able to also read it and get the insights from it. And I have a friend, he's a young man, a Navajo, that he also wants to write a children's book about traditional plants. And he's been talking about this for a long time. And both of you are accomplished writers that got published. What would you tell him for him to be able to write his own book?
Just start writing down your ideas, get a basic story idea. It may change. Might have many ideas. And as you begin to do that writing and reworking it, you'll know which direction, which story is the right one. I would say share it with people whose opinions you respect, who might have good, so you can see their reaction to it. They might have good feedback to help you, keep fine tuning that story to say what you want to say and express what you want to express, and just be ready to keep putting it through, draft after draft, because it's a process. It's a process of writing, stepping back, looking at it again, seeing where you can make improvements, hearing what other people think of it, and taking that into account. So yeah, it's a long process, and you just keep sticking with it.
And some of those stories, like the the traditional stories, they're not written. I was going to say they're already written, but they're so complex and detailed that if you know those stories, you can put them down. But the tricky part with that is putting out traditional knowledge and then opening it up to places where, maybe don't tell people where all those plants grow, because we have a way of just going out there and then now everybody wants those plants, and then they're gone, So like up here, we have families they have their harvest areas and they don't really talk about where they're at. And then some plants are more common, but I think, and then just talking with other Native authors and helping each other, because we would totally give him a reference to the publisher that worked with us. And we were given a reference by a friend to that publisher who was published before us. And so we help each other too. This is what we did, contact us and we'll share the information with you. And that story probably needs to be told because it probably contains many important wisdoms and teachings, I imagine, coming from the Dene people, that there's a lot of wisdom there that could be help the world to share that.
Yeah, for sure. I'll definitely tell him he'll be very happy. And how can people connect with you both and learn more about the book? Is there a website or a place they can go to?
The book is available on Penguin Random House under The Whale Child. It's also available on Amazon. And Audible has the audiobook, and North Atlantic Books is the publisher, and they would have information. And then I have a website, swanclan.com. So SWANCLAN.com. And that would have a way to get in touch with us as well.
All right. And thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. It's been amazing to speak to you both. I think we could have gone 10 hours and not even scratched the surface of everything that is going on with our world, with our planet. But I just want to say thank you again. This is an amazing book. I'm reading to my niece. She's loving it. And I highly recommend it to anybody that wants to know more about Indigenous knowledge, but also a heartfelt human story about taking care of the planet that is really told on a really heartwarming way. So I highly recommend the book. And thank you so much again for talking to me.
Thank you, Frank.
Really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure talking with you. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.